She was sleeping like any tired traveler, until the captain's voice broke through the cabin, shaking with fear. "Any fighter pilots on board?" Nobody expected an answer. But one woman opened her eyes, stood up calmly, and walked toward the cockpit. What happened next changed everything. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The captain's scream tore through the quiet cabin like a gunshot. It was loud, sharp, and full of fear. In seat 22C, a woman named Maria Alvarez opened her eyes slowly. She had been sleeping so deeply that for a second she did not know where she was. No one on that plane knew that this tired woman in a plain black hoodie had once flown fighter jets into war zones. No one knew she had faced enemy aircraft in the sky and come back alive every single time. No one knew that in a few minutes, she would be the only person who could save everyone on board. The flight was Continental Air 218, flying from Chicago to Rome. It was a night flight, and most of the lights inside the plane were turned off so people could rest. The plane was a large Boeing 777, and it carried 310 passengers. It was flying calmly at 36,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. Outside the windows, there was nothing but black sky and a few small stars. Inside, most passengers were sleeping under thin blankets, and a few were watching movies with their headphones on. Maria Alvarez was 38 years old. She had short brown hair, tired eyes, and she wore comfortable travel clothes. She looked like any other tired traveler heading home after a long work trip. The flight attendants who walked past her seat did not think twice about her. One of them even whispered to another that the woman in 22C looked exhausted and probably needed her rest more than her dinner. They quietly skipped waking her up for the meal service. But what nobody on that plane could see was the truth hidden inside her. Maria had spent 11 years flying fighter jets for the United States Air Force. She had flown F-16 and F-35 jets in different parts of the world during dangerous missions. She had faced enemy aircraft in real combat 4 different times, and she had come home safely every time. She had trained young pilots, led a small team of fighter pilots, and had been given awards for her bravery that she rarely talked about. She had left the military only 10 months earlier because she wanted a quieter life. She wanted to see her family more, sleep in her own bed, and stop living with constant danger. Now she worked for a private company that built safety systems for airplanes, and this trip to Rome was for a simple work meeting. Nothing more than paperwork and presentations. That is why she had let herself fall asleep so easily. She was tired, and for the first time in years, she felt safe enough to fully rest. The flight continued smoothly for the first 4 hours. Passengers slept, flight attendants walked quietly through the aisles, and the pilots in the cockpit talked about simple things like weekend plans and weather reports. Everything felt normal. But far away, something dangerous was building in the sky. About 300 miles ahead of Continental Air 218, 2 unknown military jets had entered the open airspace over the ocean. These jets were not sharing their flight plan with anyone. They were not answering radio calls from air traffic control. And they were moving in a strange pattern, almost like they were searching for something. Radar systems on the ground picked up their movement, and soon military officers on duty realized something was very wrong. One of these jets was carrying live weapons. The unknown jets began moving closer to the busy path used by passenger planes crossing the ocean. Military commanders on the ground were shocked. There was no time to safely move every passenger plane out of the way, because nobody could predict which direction the unknown jets would go next. Fighter jets from a nearby country's air force were sent up immediately to stop the threat, but they were still many minutes away. Meanwhile, air traffic controllers tried desperately to warn every passenger plane flying near that area. On Continental Air 218, Captain Daniel Reyes and First Officer Emily Chen were in the cockpit, calmly checking their instruments. Everything on their screens looked normal. Captain Reyes had almost 25 years of experience flying passenger planes, and First Officer Chen had been flying with the airline for 6 years. Neither of them had any experience with military combat flying. When the first warning message came through the radio, Captain Reyes thought it might be a simple weather alert. But the voice on the radio sounded different. It was tight, fast, and full of worry. The controller explained that unknown military jets were flying near their route and were not responding to any communication. All passenger planes in that area needed to be ready for sudden movement if the situation became dangerous. Captain Reyes felt his hands grow tense on the controls. He checked his radar screen again but saw nothing unusual yet. Still, he told the cabin crew to stop serving food and to make sure every passenger was seated with their seatbelt on. He did not want to scare anyone, so he only said there might be some rough air ahead. Over the next 10 minutes, the situation became worse very quickly. The unknown jet suddenly changed direction and began flying much faster, heading straight toward the area where passenger planes were flying. Their intentions were still unclear, but their movements were aggressive enough that military radar operators grew extremely worried. The fighter jets sent to stop them were still several minutes away, too far to arrive in time if anything happened right away. Then came the moment every controller feared. One of the unknown jets locked its targeting radar onto a large passenger plane flying near Continental Air 218. This kind of radar lock is used before a jet prepares to fire a weapon. The moment this happened, alarms went off in multiple military control rooms at the same time. Captain Reyes received an urgent message telling him to immediately drop altitude and turn his plane 40 degrees to the side. The instructions were short, direct, and clearly serious. First Officer Chen was already speaking on the radio, trying to understand what was happening, but the answers she received were short and full of tension. The flight attendants noticed the sudden change in altitude and direction, and they knew right away that this was not normal turbulence. They quickly checked that every passenger was seated and buckled. Then a message came through that changed everything. A military controller, breaking the usual rules because of how serious the danger had become, sent a message to every plane flying in that part of the sky. He explained that unknown fighter jets were approaching, that help was still minutes away, and that any plane capable of making quick defensive movements should be ready to do so immediately. The message used special terms like defensive turns, evasive patterns, and target confusion tactics. These were words normally used only by fighter pilots, and they meant almost nothing to a regular passenger pilot. Captain Reyes felt fear rise inside his chest. He was an excellent pilot, but he had never trained for combat flying. He had never learned how to avoid a missile lock or how to confuse an attacking jet. He looked at First Officer Chen, and he could see the same fear in her eyes. Then, breaking every normal safety rule, he made a decision. He reached for the intercom switch that connected to the entire passenger cabin, and he pressed it with a shaking hand. His voice came out louder than he meant it to, almost a scream, as the fear inside him broke through his calm training. Attention passengers, this is your captain speaking. Is there any fighter pilot on board? Anyone with military flying experience, please identify yourself immediately. This is an emergency. The fear in his voice shook the entire plane awake. Passengers who had been sleeping peacefully opened their eyes in shock. Some began crying quietly. Others reached for their phones to send messages to their families, afraid these might be their last words. The calm night flight had turned into a wave of fear within seconds. In seat 22C, Maria Alvarez's eyes opened instantly. Her body reacted before her mind even fully understood what was happening. Years of military training had taught her to respond immediately to certain words, and hearing "fighter pilot" spoken with that kind of fear woke every instinct inside her. Within seconds she was fully alert, her heart beating faster, but her mind sharp and clear, just like it had been during every dangerous mission she had flown before. The man sitting next to her looked at her with confusion, wondering why the captain was asking about fighter pilots on a passenger plane. Other passengers around her were shaking with fear, some crying softly, others frozen in their seats. Maria unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up quickly. Her movements were calm, quick, and full of purpose. She walked straight down the aisle toward the front of the plane, her face steady even though panic was spreading all around her. A flight attendant tried to stop her, following the normal rule of keeping passengers seated during an emergency. But something about the calm confidence in Maria's eyes made the attendant pause. Maria spoke quietly but firmly, telling the attendant that she was a retired Air Force fighter pilot and needed to speak with the captain right away. Her voice had the sharp, clear tone of someone used to giving orders during dangerous situations. The attendant's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly led Maria to the cockpit door and knocked hard, telling the pilots that a passenger claiming to be a military pilot was outside. The door opened at once. Captain Reyes looked at the woman standing before him with a mix of hope and doubt. Maria did not wait to be questioned. She quickly gave her name, her rank, and her flying background, speaking fast and clear like someone trained to report information during battle. She told him she had flown F-16 and F-35 jets for 11 years, had faced enemy aircraft in real combat, and had led a team of fighter pilots before retiring less than a year ago. Her words were confident and detailed, leaving no doubt that she truly was who she said she was. Captain Reyes felt a wave of relief rush through him. He quickly explained the situation, telling her about the unknown jets, the radar lock on a nearby plane, and the short amount of time left before real danger could strike. Maria listened carefully, her mind already working through possible options. She asked quick questions about the plane's speed, weight, and communication systems. She asked to sit at the radar screen and use the radio, needing to understand the situation clearly before making any decisions. Captain Reyes moved aside immediately, letting her take his seat, knowing that her experience was something neither he nor First Officer Chen could ever match in this moment. Maria sat down and studied the radar screen quickly, building a clear picture of what was happening in the sky around them. The unknown jets were now only a few minutes away, moving fast, leaving little time to think. She picked up the radio and spoke using her old call sign, asking for a full update on the situation. The response came fast, filled with relief from the controllers who had been desperately hoping someone with real combat experience could help. They explained that two unknown fighter jets were approaching with clear aggressive intent, that one had already locked its radar onto another passenger plane, that rescue fighter jets were still minutes away, and that several passenger planes were now in danger, including Continental Air 218. The controller asked if Maria could help guide the passenger planes into safer positions until help arrived, a request far outside normal rules, but one that showed just how serious the danger had become. Maria's mind moved quickly through her training. Passenger planes were not built for sharp, fast movements like fighter jets, but she knew certain simple techniques that could still help confuse an attacking jet, movements that would not defeat an enemy fighter, but could buy enough time to stay safe. She asked for temporary control over the movements of all nearby passenger planes, an unusual request that could only be approved during a true emergency. The controller agreed instantly and told every pilot nearby to follow her instructions without delay. Maria began giving clear, calm commands. She told some planes to slowly lower their altitude while her own plane climbed higher, creating distance that made it harder for the enemy jets to target more than one plane at a time. She told pilots to prepare for gentle but quick turns when she gave the signal, movements that were unusual for passenger planes but still safe within their limits. Her voice stayed calm through every instruction, a calmness built from years of facing real danger in the sky. The passengers on her own plane could hear pieces of her voice through the cockpit door, realizing that the quiet woman from seat 22C was now guiding several planes through some kind of serious emergency. Flight attendants tried to keep passengers calm, but everyone could feel that something big and dangerous was happening high above the ocean. The unknown jets appeared clearly on radar now, moving extremely fast, heading directly toward the group of passenger planes. Maria watched their movement closely, calculating speed and direction in her head, timing her next commands carefully. She had studied jets like these before during her training years, and she understood how a pilot flying them would think during an attack like this. When the jets were about 4 minutes away, Maria gave her first major command. She told all planes under her guidance to turn in different directions at the same time, breaking apart the neat pattern they had been flying in. The pilots hesitated for a second, unsure about breaking from their normal flight paths, but the urgency in Maria's voice and the confirmation from the ground controller pushed them to follow her lead. For large passenger planes turned in different directions at once, their movements slow compared to fighter jets, but perfectly timed thanks to Maria's clear guidance. The unknown jets reacted with visible confusion on radar, their targeting attempts disrupted by the sudden, unexpected movement of the planes. The jet that had locked onto another passenger plane lost its target completely, now searching for an easier one. Maria kept watching closely, noticing that the enemy pilots seemed aggressive but were making choices that showed they lacked deep experience handling situations like this. She gave more commands, guiding some planes higher and others lower, creating a confusing pattern in the sky that made it hard for the enemy jets to track more than one target clearly. Passengers on all 4 planes felt sudden movements, more noticeable than normal turbulence, but controlled and steady rather than wild or shaky. Flight attendants stopped trying to serve anyone and instead sat down, holding tightly to their seats as the planes moved carefully through Maria's guided pattern. Everyone understood, without needing to be told directly, that their lives depended on the calm instructions coming from the cockpit of Continental Air 218. The unknown jets made several fast passes near the group of planes, clearly trying to scare them or find an easy target, but Maria's guidance kept every plane just out of reach, moving at angles that made a clean attack difficult. The enemy pilots grew visibly frustrated, their movements becoming more careless as time went on, exactly the kind of mistake Maria had been watching for. Captain Reyes and First Officer Chen watched in amazement as Maria guided the situation with steady hands and a calm voice, processing information quickly while never losing her composure. They had never seen anything like this before, flying tactics normally used in combat now being carefully applied to protect ordinary passenger planes. It was something only someone with Maria's exact experience could ever manage to do. About 6 minutes into the emergency, the enemy jet suddenly changed behavior. The lead jet turned sharply away from the group of planes and sped off at extremely high speed, with the second jet following close behind. For a brief moment, Maria wondered if they had simply given up. But then the ground controller's voice came through the radio, filled with relief, explaining that the rescue fighter jets had arrived earlier than expected. Seeing these new aircraft approaching at high speed, the unknown jets had chosen to retreat rather than risk a real fight. Maria kept guiding the passenger planes carefully for 2 more minutes until the controller confirmed that the danger had completely passed and that the unknown jets were now being escorted far away by the rescue fighters. Only then did she finally let out a slow breath, feeling the tension slowly leave her body as the danger disappeared. She gave the pilots their final instructions, guiding them back to their normal flight paths and thanking them for trusting her judgment during such a frightening situation. Captain Reyes reached over and shook Maria's hand firmly, unable to fully put into words how thankful he felt. She had helped protect not just his plane, but 3 other planes carrying more than 1,000 passengers combined, using skills that no regular pilot could ever have. First Officer Chen sat quietly, tears in her eyes, still trying to fully understand how close they had come to real danger, and how surprising it was that a sleeping passenger turned out to be exactly the person they needed. Maria stood up, ready to return to her seat, but Captain Reyes asked her to stay in the cockpit a little longer, saying he wanted her nearby in case anything else happened, though really he simply wanted to understand more about who she was. Maria agreed and sat quietly on the small extra seat behind the pilots, feeling the tiredness return to her body now that the danger had passed. The ground controller came back on the radio, asking for a full report once they landed, telling Maria that her actions would be studied carefully as an example of how ordinary passenger planes could defend themselves during rare emergencies like this. He mentioned that she might receive an award for what she had done, but Maria simply smiled tiredly and said she already had enough awards and just wanted to return to her quiet life. Word of what had happened slowly spread through the passenger cabin. Flight attendants quietly explained to nervous passengers that the calm woman from seat 22C had once been a fighter pilot and had helped guide their plane safely through a dangerous situation. Many passengers found it hard to believe until they saw Maria walk back through the cabin later, heading to freshen up before returning to her seat. When they saw her, many stood up and clapped, some thanking her personally with tears in their eyes. The older man sitting beside her stared in complete amazement, unable to connect the tired woman who had been sleeping quietly with the confident pilot who had just helped save their lives. He asked if it was really true that she had flown fighter jets and faced real danger in the sky. Maria answered simply, saying she had only done what her training prepared her for, and that any trained pilot would have done the same. But deep inside, she knew that very few people carried the kind of experience she had, built through years of hard training and real danger, experience that happened to be needed at exactly the right moment. The rest of the flight to Rome passed quietly. Most passengers were too tired from fear to do anything but sit silently or try to rest. Maria tried to close her eyes again, but her mind kept replaying the events, thinking through every decision she had made, wondering if there was anything she could have done better. This kind of thinking was normal for her, something fighter pilots often did after every mission, checking their choices carefully to learn and improve. When the plane finally landed safely in Rome, emergency vehicles were lined up near the runway, a normal precaution after such a serious event, though thankfully they were not needed. Military officials met the plane quickly, asking Maria to join them for a detailed conversation about everything that had happened. She spent several hours answering questions, explaining her choices, and helping experts understand how passenger planes might be guided safely during future emergencies like this one. News of the event spread quickly around the world. People were amazed by the surprising story of a retired fighter pilot who happened to be sleeping on exactly the right flight at exactly the right moment. Reporters gathered outside the airport in Rome within hours, holding cameras and microphones, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had guided 4 passenger planes through danger. Airline officials tried to keep her arrival quiet, moving her through a side entrance away from the crowd, but a few passengers from the flight had already shared the story online before the plane even reached the gate. Photos of Maria walking through the cabin, calm and tired, spread quickly across social media, along with messages from grateful passengers describing how her voice had kept them from total panic. Maria was surprised by how fast the story grew. She had expected a quiet debrief with military officials, followed by a return to her hotel room and a long, much-needed sleep. Instead, she found herself answering calls from news channels in different countries, all wanting to hear her side of the story. Her old commanders advised her to speak carefully, reminding her that many details about her past missions were still private and could not be shared publicly. Maria agreed completely. She had never wanted attention for her military service, and she certainly did not want it now. She gave one short interview, at the request of her old commanders, simply saying that she had done her duty and that the real credit belonged to the brave pilots who trusted her guidance completely. She kept her answers short and calm, refusing to describe the tactical details of what she had done in the cockpit, saying only that any trained pilot in her position would have tried to help in the same way. When reporters asked about her past combat missions, she politely explained that those records were sealed and that she preferred to look forward rather than talk about the past. Her calm, humble answers only made people admire her more, and soon her name was being mentioned on news programs across several countries, though she avoided watching any of them herself. Airline executives later thanked her personally, offering her free flights for life and an official award from the company, both of which she accepted politely, though she made it clear she was not interested in becoming a public spokesperson for aviation safety. She simply wanted to finish her work meeting in Rome, fly home quietly, and return to the calm life she had built for herself after leaving the military. But privately, in quiet conversations with people who understood real combat flying, Maria admitted just how close things had come to going wrong. If the rescue jets had arrived only a few minutes later, if the enemy pilots had been more skilled, if the passenger pilots had hesitated even slightly, the outcome could have been very different. The passengers from that flight stayed connected long after, often reaching out to thank her again, though Maria preferred to think of the event simply as one more mission completed rather than something requiring constant attention. The pilots who had followed her instructions sent her letters of thanks, describing how her calm voice had given them the confidence to trust her completely during such a frightening moment. Maria returned to her normal job after the attention slowly faded, grateful to return to a quieter life, though she noticed people around her now treated her with a level of respect that sometimes felt uncomfortable. She had never wanted fame. She had only wanted to help during a dangerous situation. But her actions had unavoidably made her a symbol of quiet strength and the power of years of hard training. Sometimes, late at night, Maria would think back to that flight, remembering the moment she woke up to the captain's frightened voice, remembering the fast decisions she had made, remembering the passengers who trusted her completely even though they had never known her name before that day. She often wondered what might have happened if she had taken a different flight, or if she had not fallen asleep at all. But all those small details had lined up perfectly, placing a trained fighter pilot exactly where she was needed most. A few months later, Maria received an unexpected invitation to meet with senior officials from the Air Force, not for another interview or award ceremony, but to discuss something new. They explained that her actions during the flight had revealed a serious gap in how passenger planes were prepared for rare but real dangers in the sky. They asked Maria to help build a new training program that would teach commercial pilots simple defensive techniques, ones that regular pilots could safely use during rare emergencies without needing full military training. Maria thought carefully before agreeing. She had left military life to build a calmer future, but she could not forget the fear in Captain Reyes's voice or the relief on the passengers' faces when they finally landed safely. She agreed to help build the new program, working with a small team of experienced pilots and safety experts to create simple, clear training that could one day help other pilots handle similar situations without needing an experienced fighter pilot to happen to be sleeping in seat 22C. Years later, when Maria occasionally spoke about that flight, she would describe it as one of the most important moments of her life, not because of danger or fear, but because it showed her that even after leaving military service, her experience could still protect people in ways she never expected. She had not saved the day through loud heroism, but through quiet skill, calm thinking, and years of preparation that had waited patiently for exactly the right moment to matter. And sometime after that, when Maria flew again simply as a passenger, settling into her seat and closing her eyes for a peaceful night flight, there were no emergency calls, no frightened voices, no sudden danger in the sky. The flight was calm and steady, exactly as flying was meant to be. But somewhere far away, new pilots were learning simple defensive skills because of the work she had helped create, preparing quietly for dangers they hoped they would never actually face. Maria slept peacefully that night, 36,000 feet above the ground, surrounded by passengers who had no idea who she truly was or what she had once done. She was no longer just a tired traveler resting during a long flight. She had become someone who had helped make the skies a little safer for everyone who flew after her. When the plane landed gently the next morning, Maria woke up slowly, feeling the soft bump of the wheels touching the runway. She looked out the small window at the quiet airport outside, the early morning light spreading across the runway in a calm golden color. For a moment, she simply sat still, feeling grateful for such an ordinary, peaceful ending to a flight. No sirens, no fear, no urgent voices on the radio. Just a normal landing, the kind most people never thought twice about. As she stepped off the plane and walked through the quiet airport, nobody turned to look at her. Nobody whispered her name or asked if she had once flown fighter jets in combat. She was simply another traveler moving through the crowd, carrying a small bag over her shoulder, heading toward the exit. And that was exactly the life she had chosen to build for herself. Somewhere far away, a new group of pilots was sitting in a quiet classroom, learning simple defensive flying lessons that had come directly from her years of hard work. They did not know her name either. But because of her, they would be ready if danger ever came their way. And for Maria, that quiet, unseen kind of impact meant more than any medal or headline ever could.